The mark of a great video game is that it feels like a journey. But of course, it's not a true journey if there aren't a couple of bastards standing in your way. What up, it's me, A2Z, and we are live with my very first countdown. This time, I'll be listing my top 5 favorite bosses in video games. Boss fights have become a staple in video games, and they can often make or break the experience that you have with a game. Whether every boss fight is enjoyable, or there's just one awful boss that stands out, or they all just suck. However, today we give tribute to the bosses that stand out in the best way possible. The bosses that I acknowledge to be my all-time favorites. These are the bosses that I have the most fun fighting, no matter how many times I fight them. Now, I know in my update video I promised you a different countdown, but like I said, I decided to do a soft launch countdown just to get my feet wet. My top 25 favorite Pokemon will be next, I promise. Now, before we get this going, let me note a couple of ground rules and disclaimers. First off, I will be doing the traditional one boss per franchise rule just to keep things diverse. Second, since this is a general favorite bosses list, any major boss is eligible, including final bosses. I know people like to separate regular bosses and final bosses in countdowns, but since this is a list of my all-time favorite bosses, it's going to be pretty inclusive. And last, and most importantly, please remember that this list is my own personal opinion. I'd love to hear what your favorite boss fights of all time are in the comments, but please keep the discussion civil. I'm only saying this is preventative measure, and I wish I didn't have to, but it's better safe than sorry. Also, to add to that, I just want to note that there are quite a few game series that I have not played, so if you feel like there's an obvious boss that I missed in this list, odds are that I have not played the game, so please keep that in mind. Again, let me know in the comments, but please do keep it civil. Now, with the formalities out of the way, let's do this. There's nothing wrong with playing an easy game every once in a while. Sure, difficult games are fun, they get your heart pumping and can cause distress, to say the least. But sometimes it's nice to just pop in an easy game and de-stress. And when you think of easy games, Kirby comes to mind. Kirby games are certainly not known for their difficulty, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. The main purpose of a game is to have fun, and a lot of Kirby games definitely do that job well. A lot of Kirby foes are harmless as well, in both looks and difficulty. However, while this little pink puffball seems to be the perfect representation of easiness... Wait, that sounded wrong. Fuck it, we'll roll with it. The cutesiness of this franchise can be quite deceiving at times. Kirby also has a trend of having very unsettling bosses, ranging from floating eyeballs that cry blood, to an imp with the most blood-curdling scream. But with all that cuteness and creepiness and unsettlingness, there is one boss that's different. One boss that stands out. One boss that is the textbook definition of badass. Galactonite, living proof that real men wear pink. Introduced in Kirby Superstar Ultra as the final boss of the sub-game Meta Nightmare Ultra, Galactonite serves as a rival to our bat-winged anti-hero Meta Knight. Heralded as the greatest knight in the galaxy until he was sealed away, Galactonite definitely lives up to his reputation. He's very quick, has a wide array of attacks, some of which do a deceptively large amount of damage, and he can even summon minions. Meta Knight's attacks, which have usually been reliably strong throughout the sub-game, don't damage Galactonite as much as your previous foes. Even your Mach Tornado, which has reliably been a one-hit killer, barely takes out a third of his health. Galactonite is truly an endurance test, but despite how long it might take to kill him, he manages to keep things interesting throughout the entire fight. You even fight him again in the true arena, albeit this time as Kirby, and while this time you have access to any power-up you want, that doesn't necessarily make him any easier. Unlike in Meta Nightmare Ultra, you're unable to heal, so you have to be a lot more careful. Galactonite secures his position as one of the hardest boss fights in Kirby history, by a wide margin. This fact makes him stand out even more, since Kirby bosses are usually known for being easy. I mean, hell, they even brought him back for a surprise boss fight in the true arena of Kirby's Return to Dreamland. Now, while that fight doesn't stand out as much as the Superstar Ultra fight to me, it's still really awesome. I was surprised to see him return. But hey, he must be doing something right if they keep bringing him back. Now, of all the times you fight Galactonite, you're probably wondering why I specifically picked the one from Meta Nightmare Ultra. And that mainly comes down to Meta Knight's reason for challenging Galactonite. Meta Knight's not looking to save the world or to destroy any evil force standing in his way. He simply wants a challenge. His wish to Galactic Nova shows that all he needs to feel fulfilled is to take on the best there is. Meta Knight challenges Galactonite for pure sport, to test his limits, to prove his worth as the greatest knight in the galaxy, reaching a status that no other knight before him has ever reached. God tier. Until it was rightfully nerfed, thank God. Next! I think one of the marks of a truly good boss is that you never get tired of it the more you fight it. Whether you fought a boss 5 times, or 10 times, or perhaps 50 times, if the fun factor never disappears, then that's always a good sign. Of course, to fight a boss that many times, you'd have to play said game that many times as well. And for me, there's only one game that I can say that I've played that many times. Super Mario 64. For those of you who aren't new to my channel, you know that Mario 64 and I have a very strong attachment, with it being my first Mario game as well as my first console game. I know that game inside and out, from its worlds, to its secrets, to its boss fights, and I could, in fact, consider myself a demigod at it. Watch my LPM! Sorry. So it goes without saying that I know the bosses of this game extremely well. And while Mario does face some memorable new enemies, they pale in comparison to his one and only arch nemesis. When a fight starts off with that organ along with those menacing stomps, how could you not be excited for this final showdown with the almighty Koopa King? I have fought Bowser so many times in my life. More times than I can count. But this fight has always been, and always will be, my favorite. Now, you guys might think I'm just pulling the nostalgia card with this entry, but hear me out. If you think about all the times you fought Bowser before Super Mario 64, they weren't super memorable. Really, the only 2D Bowser fight that stands out to some degree is the one in Super Mario World. The jump to 3D, however, started the trend of making Bowser fights more cinematic and engaging. The first time you fight Bowser in Mario 64 has you engaging Bowser directly in combat for the first time in the series. In Mario 1, you just jump over him and hit the axe. In Mario 3, you just avoid his attacks and wait for him to ground pound himself to death. And in Mario World, while you do actually attack him this time, you're just throwing Mega Koopas at him. In Mario 64, you're actually walking up to the big guy, grabbing him by his tail and swinging him around. While the first 2 fights are fun in their own right, it's the final fight that stands out enough to make it onto the list. First off, I love how the arena looks. The dark clouds are the perfect backdrop for this final showdown. I already gushed about the music, but still, that organ remix of Bowser's theme is not only incredibly epic, but also extremely impressive for N64 standards. Now, the fight starts off deceptively similar to the previous 2. You grab Bowser by his tail, you swing him around, and you throw him into a bomb. However, one shot isn't enough this time. The big guy takes 3 hits now, and he sure as hell ain't going down without a fight. Bowser has a lot of attacks this time around, from creating shockwaves, to his shoulder charge, to his rain of fire, which is his most annoying attack, by the way. Make sure you grab him before he does that. Once you reach the final hit, Bowser will terraform the arena and make it into the shape of a star, which is extremely fitting. And then comes the extremely satisfying final throw. So long, Gay Bowser! In my honest opinion, no future fight with Bowser captures that same sense of menace or excitement. Galaxy 1's was pretty decent, but not as great. Galaxy 2's was far too short to enjoy. 3D Worlds had a really nice gimmick, but it wasn't enough. We don't speak of Sunshines. And Odyssey... oh, if I could count the escape scene, it would totally be on this list, but I can't. This Bowser fight is a lot of people's favorite Bowser fight for a good reason. There's just something special about defeating Bowser once and for all for the first time in 3D. And I know that in my next playthrough of Mario 64, my eventual duel with the Koopa King will be just as fun, if not more fun, than the last. Video games have truly evolved over the years. They've gone from gameplay focus with simple objectives to cinematic stories with massive worlds. Sometimes you want to experience a game that immerses you in its massive world. A game that has an incredible story to tell and whose atmosphere just stands out. Which brings us to our next entry. Okami. It's hard to describe it as just a game. Okami can also be described as a work of art. It tells an amazing story with a wonderful cast of characters. It looks absolutely beautiful, and it's got very solid gameplay. Excluding the social recognition, but we'll save that for another time. Anyway, I'd have to say my favorite arc of the game is the Ryoshima arc. Ryoshima Coast is one of my favorite areas to run around in. You get one of the most broken brush techniques in the game, and the story of the arc is pretty damn interesting. But of course, my favorite thing about the Ryoshima arc is that at the end of it all is a battle with my favorite boss in all of Okami. The master of Oni Island and the demon terrorizing Ryoshima Coast, Ninetails is one formidable foe. To start, I love the concept behind Ninetails. The fact that she's a fox and she actually disguises herself as a human female fits so well. I believe this is based on what they call in Japan... hang on, how do I pronounce this? Kitsune? Is that it? Did I say it right? Anyway, the fact that the major villain of the arc was the one guiding you for nearly everything you did throughout the entire arc just adds to her sinister nature. From cleansing the city of the poison mist to... busting into the sunken ship, to calming the water dragon terrorizing the seas, to obtaining her missing fox rods. Basically, she made you believe what you were doing would help defeat the demons, when in reality, you were helping her restore her full powers. Also, let's be real, Rao might have been the perfect disguise for Ninetails. I mean, personally I'm an ass man, but that pair though. I don't blame you, Isun. She probably would have tricked me too. Point is, you never suspect someone so close to Queen Himiko to be the root of the evil plaguing Ryoshima Coast. And then she decides to kill Himiko and blow her cover because she thinks she's got this. You ain't got nothing, you fox-headed wench. We've got a demon-slaying godwolf on our side. Now on to the fight. First of all, I love the fast-pacedness of this fight. This is easily the most action-packed, fast-paced boss in all of Okami. You're never really just sitting around waiting for Ninetails to do something. You're either dodging the way out of her quick attacks while waiting to strike, or you're doing damage. She'll eventually raise her sword up in the air, allowing you to use Thunderstorm to shock her, using the sword as a lightning rod. However, be very careful when doing this. One huge thing that stands out about Ninetails is that she has her own celestial brush. She can actually cancel out your techniques with her own, meaning you better be quick when you get your brush out. Upon shocking her, she splits into 8 separate evil rows that you can wail on with one remaining in the center. Once you destroy them all, Ninetails' true form is revealed, a one-eyed fox. At this point, the fight is basically the exact same, except she moves a lot faster, and when you shock her, she doesn't split into different evil rows. But honestly, this isn't a bad thing. The fight itself, like I said, is really fast-paced, and it stays interesting. Most of the other bosses seem really slow-paced and feel like they take longer than they actually do. Particularly the Spider Queen and Orochi, who you fight twice for some reason, despite how slow that fight feels. Great. Point is, I never get bored of fighting Ninetails, and honestly, how could you get bored with such an amazing song playing? Okami has an amazing soundtrack overall, so the fact that this song stands out as one of my favorites really says something. Ninetails is both an amazing villain and a fun opponent, and the fight with her is a great way to cap off my favorite arc in the entire game. The Legend of Zelda is a series known for mixing action and adventure, with a nice balance of puzzle solving and enemy bashing. As the series entered the third dimension, the action became more pronounced, and this was especially evident with the boss fights. Ocarina of Time had some exciting action-packed bosses that were a joy to fight, such as Phantom Ganon, Twin Rova, and Big Bad Ganondorf himself. Skyward Sword, on the other hand, had an overall weak selection of bosses. Whether it's the fact that figuring out how to defeat them is painfully easy, gee, I wonder what its weak point is! Or their fights would just be monotonous and have a stupid gimmick. Why do I have to fight this fucker 3 times? Sure, Girahim and Demise were fun, but really, the other bosses just weren't fun enough. Except for one. The Ancient Cistern might not be my favorite dungeon in Skyward Sword, but it's home to my favorite boss in the entire Zelda series. Galactos is an absolute joy to fight, and the fact that most of the other bosses are nowhere near as fun makes Galactos stand out even more. First off, let me start with his design. I've always been a fan of the ancient golem motif, and Galactos pulls it off so well, with the gold painting and the 6 arms, and a face that really resembles something you'd see from an ancient civilization. Like, honestly, Galactos really does look like something an ancient civilization would have built. It really is one of my favorite looking Zelda bosses. Anyway, design talk over, on to the actual fight. The first phase starts off pretty simple. Galactos is restricted to the center of the arena, so it can't really damage you unless you get close to it. Its weak point is its core, but it smartly covers it with its arms, so you have to, say it with me kids, use the item that you got in the dungeon! So in this case, you use the whip to get rid of its arms after it lunges at you so you can slash its core up with your sword. Seems simple enough, right? Too simple, actually. Which is why when you finish the first phase... things start to get fun. Galactos' second phase cranks things up to 11. First off, this thing's got legs now, so you can't just camp out in the corner. It will follow you, and it will try to slash you with its 6, count them, 6 cutlass swords. It's gonna swing them around wildly, so don't even think of trying to whip its arms off while it's doing that. It'll also summon curse bokoblins, but really, they shouldn't be too much of a problem. A simple slash of the sword should deal with them easily. Eventually, it'll lunge at you like before, allowing you to whip off its arms it used to attack you. However, it won't be as simple as the first phase. Its core is protected by a cage, and don't forget, it's got legs this time, so you can't easily reach it. What you have to do this time around, and this is what I love about this fight, is actually pick up one of the cutlass swords it used against you and attack with it. You start by attacking its legs, bringing its core back down to your level, then you destroy the cage, exposing its core, allowing you to attack it. Honestly, I have so much fun with the second phase of Galactos. Bosses that make you be resourceful are always a plus in my book. Plus, swinging around that giant cutlass is so much fun. I kid you not, while I'm swinging my Wii remote while attacking it, I legit get into it as if I'm actually swinging around that cutlass. Skyward Sword might not be my favorite Zelda game, and it certainly does have its problems, but I honestly think there's still some fun to be had with it, and Galactos is a prime example. How fitting that for this last entry, we're gonna discuss the franchise that's been a part of my life the longest. Pokemon has come a long way since its humble beginnings in the 90s. I've played pretty much every game in the series, I fought countless trainers, and it was hard to narrow my choice down to one. But of course, a decision had to be made. Now, if you've been around my channel since the beginning, you know that Pokemon Black and White are my favorite Pokemon games of all time. The battling is so seamless and quick, and it introduced some of my all-time favorite Pokemon. Sure, I loved Red and Blue, but let's be real, those games have not aged well, and if they weren't your first Pokemon games, you're probably not gonna like them. Anyway, Pokemon Black and White were the first games in the series to put emphasis on the story. For the first time in the series, you actually get attached to the characters. However, there's one character in particular that stands out from the crowd in a major way. In fact, he stands out enough to make the top spot on the list. And Harmonia, the king of Team Plasma, one of the heroes recognized by the legendary dragons, and who I consider to be your true rival in Pokemon Black and White. You fight N quite a few times throughout your journey, but it's the final battle with him at the climax of the story that stands out the most to me. However, to start, I'll provide some background and talk about the first few times you fight him. When you meet N, he simply seems like a strange young man who cares deeply for Pokemon, yet in a very different way from what you've seen in the series so far. However, as you encounter him throughout your journey, he begins to reveal his motives, from wanting to be friends with the legendary dragon, to revealing himself as the king of Team Plasma, to swearing to separate people and Pokemon at all costs because he believes Pokemon will truly be happier if he does so. And eventually captures the legendary dragon and vows to use its power to defeat the Pokemon League and force the separation of people and Pokemon, which he still naively believes will be for the good of the world, completely oblivious to Ghetsis' manipulation. Once you reach the Pokemon League, you unfortunately see that the worst case scenario has come to pass. And has defeated Alder with the power of his legendary dragon, and the only way to save the world and the relationship between people and Pokemon is to face him with a legendary dragon of your own. Now to start, what makes this boss stand out more than any other boss in any other Pokemon game is that for the first time in the main series, yes, this means I'm now counting Greevil Shadow Lugia, for the first time in the main Pokemon series, a boss has a legendary Pokemon on their team. I'd also like to mention that this is the first time in this series where you're required to catch the legendary Pokemon in order to proceed through the story. The game wants to emphasize that the battle with N would be an absolute mismatch if you didn't have a legendary dragon of your own, just to show the gravity of the situation. The game will also give you the option of adding the dragon to your party, and while you very much could defeat N without the dragon, it just wouldn't feel right any other way. And so it begins. Reshiram vs Zekrom, Truce vs Ideals, Yin vs Yang, Fusion Flare versus Fusion Bolt. However, don't think that the fight is over once you defeat his dragon. N still has 5 other very formidable Pokemon on his team, including Archeops, Klinklang, and Zoroark. And this will more than likely be the first time you fight anything in the Zoroark line, since both Zorora and Zoroark are locked behind events. The music that plays is absolutely incredible. It's a much more serious, intense version of N's original battle theme, and the background is so gorgeous with the dark clouds swirling around. The overall atmosphere does an amazing job of showing the gravity of everything happening. You really do feel like you're battling to save the entire world. I could not have asked for a better final battle with N. Now to close this entry and to shed light as to why N is one of my favorite boss battles of all time, let me explain why N works so well as a villain. N is the king of Team Plasma, so you'd think he shares the same beliefs and ideals as his followers. However, over time, you learn that something just doesn't add up. The members of Team Plasma are sinister, manipulative, and do a good job of putting up a front. They act like they're liberating Pokemon from oppression, but behind closed doors, they could care less about the well-being of the Pokemon they rescue. N, on the other hand, is much different. You can tell right from the moment you meet him that his intentions are pure. As you go through the story, you learn even more about N's past. Ghetsis had been manipulating him since he was a child, deliberately having him grow up near hurt and abandoned Pokemon in order to instill certain emotions and beliefs in him, so he could use N to put his master plan in motion. N, being the innocent child that he was, couldn't help but follow Ghetsis' influence. N's caregiver Concordia describes him perfectly with this simple quote: "N's heart is pure and innocent, but there is nothing more beautiful and more terrifying than innocence." And that'll do it for the countdown. Thank you all so much for watching. This took a lot of work to put together, and I hope that you all enjoyed it. And I wish I could have gotten this out sooner than I did. I had a lot of things going on, work was keeping me busy. I wish I got it out sooner, but I hope you guys agree with me when I say better late than never. Hopefully. But the most important thing is I hope that you all enjoyed it, because I put so much work into this. And I hope you all look forward to any and all future countdowns that come to this channel. Speaking of which, Top 25 favorite Pokemon is next. That is the one that I've been looking forward to so much. I cannot wait to get that ready for you guys, and I hope you're as excited about it as I am. Now, for those of you who are new and who have never seen my channel before this video, I mostly do Let's Plays. I've got a few of them running on screen right now, and I hope you take the time to check them out. If you like what you saw here, hopefully you'll like what you see on those Let's Plays. They're what I mainly do, and I put so much work into them, and I do them for your enjoyment. So, if you got time, check them out, and I hope you enjoy them. And for all my longtime viewers who are wondering what my next Let's Play is going to be, I'll tell you this. There is footage of my next Let's Play in this video. That's right. In this entire video, there is actually footage of what my next Let's Play is going to be. So you're going to have to dig through and find out which game of all the games I've shown footage on is actually going to be my next Let's Play. So that'll keep you occupied for about a week, which is when my next Let's Play premieres. So, yeah. Next Let's Play comes out in a week. Top 25 favorite Pokemon will be the next countdown. It'll come out in the next few months. Hopefully sooner. I'm not too sure. But, yep. Until then, this is A to Z, signing off.